Oh, there we are. Hey, oh, all right. There we are. What's up, guys? Uh-oh. Hold on. I am not sized up the way I ought to be. Hold on. Let me fix that. How'd I get out of size? Oh, right there. And, hold on. Need to pull you down like that. Hey, that's better. All right, what's up, guys? I'm decked out on the face today. How you guys doing? Polymathing, what is up? All right, I gave about an hour's notice on this one, so we'll see how things go. I've been in such an interesting place, and my mindset, it's just like, I'm lucky if I can really sit there and say, okay, I can set out a planned live stream where it's just me doing my thing for fun on my channel and without anything else or anyone else going on. Which, and of course this is different. The live stream where I'm sitting down at Command Center versus me popping up on my phone. Something I couldn't do for many, many years because YouTube had capped you at 1,000 subs. You needed 1,000 subs to live stream from your phone, right? And I was like, ugh, right? And I never made 1,000 subs before my last channel was canceled. I was shy of 800. Not even shy. I don't know. I was like maybe 30, 40 people away from like 800 last time. Sorry if the music actually sounded a little bit doubled or echoey. I forgot to kill the microphone channel, so it was running through a stereo and a stereo mixed to mono at the same time. It wasn't like picking up like when that happens, that's not even microphone feedback. The mic was on mute. But it's that the mic track was not on mute and the audio still patches to it, and I don't know how to make it not patch to it for my setup. Usually I catch that. Today I didn't. So the other songs will not sound the same. They'll sound better and as intendedly produced. Anyway, here we are, moving along with the Heidegger situation. I've been loving this because this stuff has been helping me in things like my driving live streams. Like I can tap into all sorts of these concepts and stuff. I got to finish integrating it, right? Because it gets kind of annoying to sit there and end up becoming a parrot for the other content that you absorb, right? And it's not like I'm trying to give Martin Heidegger a shout out so he can be on my channel to do interviews. Shouting out people to do interviews is, I suppose, incredibly unprofessional or something at this point. I don't know. I don't like doing things the way other people like to do them. Perhaps it's because I wasn't beaten enough as a child. So, how dare you spare the rod on me, sir? I should have cried a lot more. No, that's sarcasm. I had enough beatings, all right? Beatings is not the way, guys. Beatings is not the way. And believe me, I'm not saying don't be a fucking stern father, but beatings is not the way. I mean, I'm sure there's an extreme situation. Everybody's different. And I certainly was a problem child. But that's a lot of deep psychotherapy that all of us have to explore about ourselves in different little ways. Some of us, it doesn't matter so much. For others, like the Aries that I am, it becomes a very big deal. And then you live your life trying to figure out stuff in the primordial because you're thinking, you can track back childhood trauma from like almost pre-memory. Like, like when you're like 1 year old, like I can sit there and I can have a vague memory of being in a crib. I can seriously have these kinds of, I can almost have a vague memory of being born, right? And then you're so effing removed from the vaguest memory. Isn't it interesting how the word vague is like Vegas? And then there's the vagus nerve. And then Vegas is kind of like Venus. And Vegas being a certain kind of fluid marketplace, and Venus expressed through Libra is Venus in the marketplace. Oh, these are interesting ideas to explore. But anyway, my point is simply this, is that when you get into such deep regression of relationship to bring about and talk about the most primordial meaning of the terminology of a word while you're still developing your relationship with reality and using the word as a tool for the mind, right? There's a certain set point where they stop feeding you words to close your imagination. They don't want you to know all sorts of different words and terms. And I believe a lot of these words and terms are somehow unconsciously known. Or the vagabond. Oh, that's good. The vagabond. Are we bonded to the Vegas? Ooh. And also, vagan. Vagan is kind of like vacant, too. And we can talk about the abandonment of responsibility, right? The reckless abandon that is Vegas. Oh, that is fascinating. That is fascinating. Normally, I don't do that kind of weave thing, but I think Gabe and probably Chance are rubbing off on me. But anyway, so I think I've primered getting up to reading Heidegger enough now. Long story short, I've got a knack for the primordial words here because as you dissect these things, you realize how much just word dissection, integration, reintegration, new terminologies and context just completely just expands the mind when you're capable of extracting the meaning and the significance of that new word in relationship to the reason why you now know that word. 48, chapter 48, that which is still outstanding, the end, totality. I believe we're still talking about death, or we had just covered the basics of death, and now we're kind of moving into other things that we can talk about because we've covered death. Within the framework of this investigation, our ontological characterization of the end and totality can be only provisional. To perform this task adequately, we must not only set forth the formal structure of end in general and of totality in general, we must likewise disentangle the structural variations which are possible for them in different realms. That is to say, deformalized variations which have been put into relationship respectively with definite kinds of entities as subject matter, and which have had their character determined in terms of the being of these entities. This task, in turn, presupposes that a sufficiently unequivocal and positive interpretation shall have been given for the kinds of beings which require that aggregate of entities be divided into such realms. What do we got here? Anthony makes videos. How's it going, Anthony? Oh, yes. Is it 4:20 where you are? Oh my God. Salute. Let's, all right. For everybody in Mountain Time? It should be Mountain Time. If you're in Mountain Time. For everybody in Mountain Time. I think Colorado's mountain time, right? Rocky Mountain High? Woo, let's get a Rocky Mountain High going on. Welcome to the show, AMV. I'm going to call you AMV. This task in turn presupposes that a sufficiently unequivocal and positive interpretation shall have been given for the kinds of beings which require that the aggregate of entities be divided into such realms. But if we are to understand these ways of being, we need a clarified idea of being in general. The task of carrying out in an appropriate way the ontological analysis of end and totality breaks down not only because the theme is so far-reaching, but because there is a difficulty in principle. To master this task successfully, we must presuppose that precisely what we are seeking in this investigation, the meaning of being in general, is something which we have found already and with which we are quite familiar. Yeah, it's 6:20 here, too. Nice to meet a fellow East Coaster. You know, people on real time, Anthony. And you are from Colorado. Awesome. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Good for you to be here. All right. In the following considerations, the variations in which we are chiefly interested are those of end and totality. These are ways in which Dasein gets a definite character ontologically, and as such, they should lead to a primordial interpretation of this entity. Ah, there's my favorite word again, primordial. Keeping constantly in view the existential constitution of Dasein already set forth, we must try to decide how inappropriate to Dasein ontologically are those conceptions of end and totality, which first thrust themselves to the fore, no matter how categorically indefinite they may remain. The rejection, Zerweisung, of such concepts must be developed into a positive assignment, or Zerweisung, of them to their specific realms. In this way, our understanding of end and totality in their variant forms as existentialia will be strengthened, and this will guarantee the possibility of an ontological interpretation of death. But even if the analysis of Dasein's end and totality takes on so broad an orientation, this cannot mean that the existential concepts of end and totality are to be obtained by way of a deduction. All right? So he's saying it cannot mean that you can handle an existential concept's end and totality by deduction. You cannot deduce. You cannot Sherlock Holmes the totality and end of Dasein. So on the contrary, the existential meaning of Dasein's coming to an end must be taken from Dasein itself, right? It's, in other words, it's extraordinarily subjective, right? Like I've said, being in time is kind of panning out to being the epistemology of subjectivism, to be honest with you. To be honest with you, this does feel like it is the complement, right? Both of them are two ways the mind works towards an individuality, right? Especially when you talk about the difference between your Dasein and someone else's Dasein and dealing with the reconciliation. And then you have Ayn Rand, who is just all about making sure you have a 360-degree spectrum of the subject at hand, right? To be objective means to understand every angle possible from inside and out, and to know everything within the fullest extent that a natural man can understand it, and then draw a conclusion. And that is the epistemology of objectivism. Here we are learning something that I would almost call the epistemology of subjectivism. So I'm super glad I read this book, because I've been thinking about that reconciliation in my head for forever as a useful mechanism for perceptual reality, life, navigation, so you can jump between the different ways as they serve you, moment to moment, because sometimes a matter is so personal that to ignore the subjective would be to deny the self, right? And certainly I don't think Ayn Rand would think that that would be the case in her end, but she may have been thinking of subjectivism and kind of saying that it has a problem of being relativistic. And relativism can pull you right into collectivism if you choose to be relative to the status quo around you. And once again, I actually think that, you know, like they say, everything is good in moderation, including moderation, right? So that kind of gets into it in that sense. D.E. Saccone. What's up, D.E. Saccone? Nice to see you. You're new to the chat. Welcome. Are you a paisan like me? Partial paisan? Let's see here. But even if the analysis of Dasein's end in totality takes on so broad an orientation, this cannot mean that the existential concepts of end and totality are to be obtained by way of a deduction. On the contrary, the existential meaning of Dasein's coming to an end must be taken from Dasein itself, and we must show how such ending can constitute being a whole for the entity which exists. That this is a rare moment thus far in the book where it almost sounds whatchamacallit, repetitive, because talking about Dasein is also talking about, you know, talking about the wholeness of a very peculiar concept that is part of this this characteristic that existence possesses. If I've got my words straight there. So we may formulate in three theses. Three thesis? Is that what it's saying? Three, because it's either thesis or theses, and that doesn't sound right. So I think it's thesis, and maybe thesis wasn't always spelled without the I, because usually it's with an I instead of an E in the second vowel. But anyway, mezzo here, Veneto Welsh. Aha! Okay, we may formulate three theses that the discussion of death up to this point. 1. There belongs to Dasein as long as it is a not yet, which it will be, that which is constantly still outstanding. Okay, so like that makes sense, right? It's talking about like the place in the mind at any given moment that you worry about death. Thesis and theses, theses would be, and theses. It's so obnoxiously close on the tongue. It's why censorship is the height of absurdity. I can say fudge, I can say duck, but I can't say fuck in certain places. Isn't that fucking ridiculous? I can talk about fudge. I can talk about a duck that shouldn't eat fudge. And there's fudge and duck in a sentence. But if I say what the fuck, it's not the same as don't fudge the duck. This is the ridiculousness of censorship in vulgar language concepts, right? And then there's and then it's just a little bit different when it comes to political correctness, which most of that is gone now. It's still, there's a specter of it that lurks. Half of it's going away just because so many people that now work in these companies are just experientially like seeing like the incongruency of the fact and just having to go back to. We used to always say that, the politicians or somebody's lying to us, and maybe we should remember that was a thing, and we shouldn't be like, I don't think we know any better than this schmuck, and even though we've got college education, like, I think a lot of guys over there are like that now. And then some of us happen to be pretty damn good, and we just happen to be right, even if our production value is atrocious, and I have to get likes by taking my shirt off and painting my face. Anyway, by the way, please like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell notification. Thank you. Okay. The coming to its end of what is not yet at an end, in which that what is still outstanding is liquidated as regards its being, has the character of no longer Dasein, right? Fearing the end of the world, fearing the end of your life, right? Fearing the end of the way you do things. Daseined to be broken and insane. There are various worlds that are Daseined to break you and gaslight you. Those worlds are very, very challenging, and it can be incredibly unfair because it's the exploitation of your unconscious. And there are some very monstrous things that are exploiting the unconscious. Some things are just human nature of other unconscious beings, other betrayals, for more personal and petty reasons, and not associated with the inhuman grand architects in which the greater scheme of what we are fighting for and against and about are the subject matter. But yet, at the same time, we can take wisdom from the context of the word existential to Heidegger in this book, right? That with a lot of wisdom, we don't have to worry so much about it, because with that wisdom, we have really learned to protect ourselves. We've really learned to know ourselves, and thus know our world, and thus know our surroundings and everything else, and how things work, and how things do and can be compromised, and what effort it takes to violate all sorts of things, and especially to violate them and get away with it or hide it or whatever, right? And then you realize that you just need to have enough energy for the moment where they fuck with your world, right? Like, for instance, right now, you and my computers and phones on the internet, some people are very good at being meticulous about getting something and securing it right away. I am not. Right? And they have to be that way, because they just got, like, their phone, they may have sensitive company data on it and whatever, and they've got the time and the resources. It's a big part of their life, and so they're constantly securing files and things like that to make sure that hackers can't just get access to it, or somebody doesn't just accidentally open up a folder and then gets a company secret, right? Or organization secret. I'm just a guy, doing such normally ordinary things, despite the fact that I do wizard shit, that I'm really not that fucking worried about it, because I think I owe it to everybody to be so damn aware and let it not bother my nervous system that much, and say, listen, it's okay to be a little bit exposed, to be a little bit sloppy, because we're gonna kill ourselves. We're gonna fucking kill ourselves protecting ourselves from a threat that 99% of the time is not going to be expending the resources on you, because you're part of a larger problem to them that they have no particular interest in you until collateral is necessary. Because they also know that you're telling the truth when you say, I want to be left alone and live my life. They don't want to leave you alone and let you have your life, but they also don't want to poke you too damn much either, unless they want to fucking, really end it for you, right? And it's all sorts of things. Plus, being open like this, your guys' inexistence and awareness of me, that's a form of protection on a psychic level, because if they do something to me and I am no more. At least no more in your Dasein. You will be a witness with a testimony about what you know about everything up until that moment. And they don't like that. They don't like that because then they know that my audience could figure out who they are. And they don't really take that risk unless they're taking down a big fish. Anyway, in Dasein, am I down here? Yeah, no, Dasein coming to an end of place. Yeah. So in Dasein, there is undeniably a constant lack of totality, which finds an end with death. This is not yet belongs to Dasein as long as it is. This is how things stand phenomenally, right? So this is Dasein in its relationship to all the possibilities that are immediate to your subjective experience of Dasein. So now we're getting into probabilities. Now we're getting into you having control of your own will and your own timeline, right? Because the not yet means that it means that you're making a determination. Because guess what? Death. I'm sure if I stab myself in the right place with this hard enough and ignored all the pain until I ruptured a lung or pierced whatever, right? Like I could make that choice, or I could say I'm going to choose never to die. To never have a totality, to never have an end. And then, as we understand it, an existential aspect of nature will introduce itself over time, such as the degradation of telomeres, causing aging and eventually organ failure. So anyway, and as an animist, all the things I do for my body, all the things I do for my wholeness of self, my three-part soul, is to do things like tell my telomeres and my cells to reproduce, and reproduce well and fast and often and strong and perfect in every way. And according to my Dasein. So, Polymethane just had deja vu. So you believe you've heard me say that before? If this was recent deja vu, it could be that it feels like deja vu, because if you've been listening, I know you listen to a lot of my stuff, and because the last, like, maybe even 2 streams or so, we've been in this death topic with Dasein. There's a lot of paraphrasing that brings in the new information as chapters evolve. But also you may have had legit deja vu, because I used to have a lot of deja vu. I don't get so much deja vu anymore. Deja vu was like a bigger experience in my Dasein for many, many years leading up to, maybe like 2014 or so. I think around 2014 is when I had my last, string of deja vu experiences. And then I almost never had them since. And I really felt like I was feeling the timeline edits in those deja vus. Like just being aware and just noticing them, even if the deja vu was extraordinarily personal. And often a lot of deja vu had a significance to it, like it was something I heard on the radio, like what you're hearing from my voice just a few moments ago that gave you deja vu. Because deja vu often is inherently an augury, you're usually making a strong note about that time, that perhaps this is a timeline where you actually made a better decision, and it's forcing the simulation to respond to your informed field. I think that the archaics material on simulation theory is just about damn well right on point. Just about. So Anthony says, death is the end of being, but instead perhaps we forget questioning being and instead return to the question of whether to move our being, our Dasein. I think that we're making, I mean, let me read that again. Death is the end of being, but instead, perhaps, we forget questioning being and instead return to the question of whether to move our being. Right, to be in a different world, to ask ourselves if we want to belong in this world or that, right? And to know that changing your situation, right? And like I said, simulation, responding to you breaking pattern, right? And remember, the matrix etymologically comes down as basically it is the spirit of the goddess of your world. Plain and simple, is the spirit of the goddess of your world that is the womb that you are living in. And that is the power and the dimensions of your Dasein. And we have Destruction Art Studios. Oh, that's a fucking kick-ass name, bro. Oh, I love that name. Good Ing. Are we saying Ing because you don't know if it's morning, evening, rising? Because if you know me, I say grand rising before noon. And then sometimes I slip and I say morning because, we're programmed that way, right? It's just like, you get shocked and you say, Jesus Christ, right? You're a pagan, but you're saying Jesus Christ. It's like, I've worshipped Jesus in fucking 30 years. Fuck you. Why am I saying Jesus Christ, right? But it's just something we say. Probably because of the etymological, something more primordial and archaic about those two terms and how they were used, and probably had a very different context before the events of the Gospels that may or may not have ever happened, but certainly were written and popularized ever took place. Let's see here. Yeah, I was trying to discern that exact thing. For a brief moment, felt like that time VHS fast-forward effect. Yeah. You'll feel it can feel a little bit like that, because once you start acknowledging that you're in the midst of a deja vu, you might have your nervous system kind of kick into gear, and you feel like that you have to catch up, right? For some reason, there's a sense of, oh, this is deja vu. This has happened before. So you'll feel like you're behind, right? Like if I'm trying to get somewhere and then I look over my shoulder and I've crossed the same block again, I realize that I'm still a mile away and yet it's 15 minutes have passed. I still got another 15 minutes to go. I'm going to be late, right? So your mind starts rushing because deep down inside you're telling yourself, wait a minute, I'm in the past again. How'd I get here? I better hurry up. Right, until the moment passes and you realize everything's fine, but your mind went there and it was real to your mind for a moment on a subconscious. I'd say that's the subconscious, right? All of that kind of works on the subconscious because that's the most immediate places the mind operates from on the reflexive, on the lizard brain, reptilian brainstem level, with your limbic system. Feeling like, hold on a second, I'm disoriented, I'm not in control, I'm now in alert, and that's when you're like, and that's if nobody ever sees Locke get irritated because, I don't irritate Locke because he's my sweet little boy, but from times when Locke is like, doesn't quite know what I'm doing and I'm making sudden and loud noises, he goes, like that, and he tenses up. So, do I have to? His pupils will just flicker real fast, right? And then I'll see his posture relax a second because sorry, buddy, sorry, and then he'll relax right away. He's not like a snake. They don't have his temperament is he's adorable. I love him. Just like I'll fall asleep, and as long as he doesn't scratch my face climbing somewhere, it's just great. He'll lay down, or he'll poke around like this, and like it'll take forever to like lay down if he's going to. But anyway, just like different reptilians have different temperaments and mannerisms, right? And so that's going to translate to any actual interdimensional reptilians, as well as what's going on in our psychic nervous systems. Anyway, Anthony makes videos. So, kind of like Freud's so-called death drive, or thanatos, which is womb envy. Just freestyling over here, laugh out loud. I don't know enough. Like, I've only read Freud's dissertation on the collective ego, actually, right? Like before Jung did the collective unconscious, Freud did the collective ego, and I thought he did a decent job. But Freud also had his own Oedipus complex that he was projecting into all of his work. So Freud was just getting at something that his lineage had been disassociated from for a long time in the German world because of Christianity's war on the goddess and the different kind of relationship a man had with a woman overall. And there's a lot of things that are going on in our decline, and not everything is something that you can blame on particular groups who just ended up, by the merit of us not caring enough about our own integrity, let others come to compromise our integrity. By the merit of how many Christian slaves the European world bought to work for them, it was inevitable that Europe would become Christian, because eventually those slaves, who are still human, dignified, sovereign souls, equal to all other men on a certain spiritual level, were going to transcend Heimdall's decree of being a thrall. They were going to figure out how you go from being a thrall to being a carl, right? And which then, once they created carls, we had to establish classes within classes, because now the thralls had to be treated like carls, and the carls had to be treated not like jarls, because the jarls had to up their standards so the carls could have a higher standard, because people didn't want to get toppled because there was upward mobility. And then also that ruined a good thing or two for various elites. And some of those elites got over it, and some of those elites were just like, fuck these pigs, they don't deserve anything, they're still slaves. Right? And these are different attitudes that have developed and then reconstituted, and that's why you eventually get, feudalism, communism, so on and so forth. In Dasein, there is undeniably a constant lack of totality which finds an end with death. This not yet belongs to Dasein as long as it is. This is how things stand phenomenally. Is this to be interpreted as still outstanding? Okay, we have an annotation. Let me put that there. All right. Okay. Eber darf der phenomenal, I think it's phenomen. It's probably for phenomenon or phenomenal. Tatbestand das zum Dasein, solange es ist, dieses noch nicht gehört, als Oststand interpretiert werden. The contrast between Tatbest and Oststand is perhaps intentional. With relation to what entities do we talk about that which is still outstanding? When we use the expression, we have in view that which indeed belongs to an entity, but is still missing. Outstanding as a way of being missing is grounded upon a belonging to. Okay. All right. Don't have to read that, but do I have to read this one? No, I don't. Yep. That's my rule. If the annotation doesn't have any English context, I'm not going to read it. For instance, the remainder, hold on a second, I'm off screen here. Yeah. For instance, the remainder yet to be received when a debt is to be balanced off is still outstanding. That which is still outstanding is not yet at one's disposal. When the debt gets paid off, that which is still outstanding gets liquidated. This signifies that the money comes in, or in other words, that the remainder comes successfully along. By this procedure, the not yet gets filled up, as it were, until the sum that is owed is all together. This is an excellent analogy for me, because last week I indeed had reached the point where these words all happened for me with my outstanding loan to my credit union from the truck that I took out back at the end of 2016. Okay? So I filled up that sum and put it all together. It's all together. So now the debt is paid off. There is no more outstanding, so I get the liquidation of the assets. So, in other words, when I get paid, I don't have to stress that paycheck towards the coming to that time of having it all together. So, therefore, to be still outstanding means that what belongs together is not yet all together. Ontologically, this implies the unreadiness to hand of those portions which have yet to be contributed. Yes, the unreadiness to hand. These portions have the same kind of being as those which are ready to hand already, and the latter, for their part, do not have their kind of being modified by having the remainder come in. Right, so this is a particular, it's a negative presence of Dasein, right? That's kind of what this debt is, because it's this imaginary restriction because of how it ties up your resources in a certain way, right? But that's also, in this kind of a debt, is fine because it's what you asked for. You made an agreement for that, and you could have made other decisions, but you wanted the benefits. You wanted the benefits because it was that important towards your plans and what you were willing to make sacrifices about. So, whatever lack of togetherness remains, das Bestand und Zusammen gets paid off by cumulative piecing together. Entities for which anything is still outstanding have the kind of being of something ready to hand. The togetherness, das Zusammen, is characterized as a sum, and so is that lack of togetherness which is founded upon it. All right, give me a moment. Thank you, want to get an idea of how much more reading is left in this chapter. A lot. Quite a lot. Okay, we're going to take a break right here. This is an excellent place to take a break. I've gone maybe about 45 minutes after getting through all the introductions, so this has been a long segment. So we're going to jump in. I'm going to play more of the Fawn album, and great news with me playing this Fawn album. second. There we go. Is that I've got the file on hand, so I'm not playing this off of YouTube. So there won't be any advertising shenanigans and lockups with the feed. All right. We shall be right back.
Spirits on these magic hours, dwelling in the sylvan bowers, in the trees is a ghostly breeze. Light a candle for the dead, sprigs of fur to warm their bed, and in songs bless the ancient ones.
In moonlight we gather to join with the unseen, calling the spirits who come forth on Halloween.
The sacred smoke of juniper and buckler purifies the air. Dressed as fae, we chase the bad away.
In moonlight we gather to join with the unseen, calling the spirits who come forth on Halloween. Holy fire, blessed waters, guide your loyal sons and daughters. Darkest night and shining moon, strengthen our song and tune. Holy fire, blessed waters, guide your loyal sons and daughters. Standing in the moonlight there, with stars under the horn and hair. Holy fire, blessed waters, guide your loyal sons and daughters. And through the misty night forlorn, shines his crown from horn. Holy fire, blessed waters, guide your loyal sons and daughters. The green Lord haunt wonders her vein, help us to be born again. Holy fire, blessed waters, guide your loyal sons and daughters. In moonlight we gather to join with the unseen, calling the spirits who come forth on Halloween.
All right, and we are back. Oops, there we go. I can't wait for the next segment. I love this effing song. But anyway, I wanted to show you guys real quick, which is why this is up right now. I downloaded this, and hopefully this will be helpful because I hate saying and this Greek term and that Greek term, so I'm trying to upgrade in real time, and I almost forgot that I had this. And I even forgot that I pulled it up before I started the stream. But no Greek terms had popped up yet. But now, next time the Greek terms pop up, I can look it right up, right? So, the transliteration and the meaning. And this is specifically for the phenomenological method of investigation, but I already know that I've seen some of this stuff, and and if I'm going to pretend, if I'm even going to pretend that I like and respect Dr. Amon Hillman, shout out Lady Babylon, then I better try better with the Greek. Anywho. But this lack of togetherness, which belongs to such a mode of togetherness, this being missing as still outstanding, cannot by any means define ontologically that not yet, which belongs to Dasein as its possible death. Dasein does not have at all the kind of being of something ready to hand within the world. The togetherness of an entity of the kind which Dasein is in running its course until that course has been completed is not constituted by a continuing piecing on of entities which somehow and somewhere are ready to hand already in their own right. What we got here? Throughout this sentence, Heidegger uses words derived from the verb laufen, to run. Laufen means laufen. Of course, I have to acknowledge that it sounds like lofi, as in Loki Lofeson, and lofe means fair. Now, to run, that's interesting, right? And, I've seen plenty of fair maiden who can do quite the run. It's often part of being fair, because being a fair maiden usually means you have grace and elegance, you know how to walk, and you know how to move, because you know how to use your body. And, Farbati is going to be the same thing in a very, very different sense, right? But let's take a look here. So, laufen, to run. Thus, in running its course represents in seinem Verlauf. Its course has been completed. Represents es seinem Lauf. Collendend hat, continuing, represents fortlaufende. So continuance and course are the contexts in which Lauf is being used within these terms and words, or kind of compound words. And I certainly can see that as, like, a course is, like, if I'm running on a course, I'm within a particular modality within Dasein, right? When I go for my jog at the beach, I'm on a particular jogging course, and that jog time is within its own world, within the world that I know and understand. And it's a different world than people I'm witnessing all around me that are not doing the same thing that I am doing, right? Whether they're just standing there, walking in the same direction, or, the way that they're walking, perhaps. Don't forget whatever they're listening to, whether they're with somebody or not, the kind of clothes they choose to have that experience in, right? And so that whole experiencing encompassment, remember how I talk about the Dasein, the matrix, the goddess womb, right? So this can be kind of perhaps an expression of the Lofi spirit, the Jotun of Lofi, right? She is not a trickster, and Farbati are not tricksters. They created a trickster because they are complete opposites of that cause a certain kind of tension. She is the kind of thing that shouldn't be with the energy of a cruel striker, because she's going to cruelly be struck. And that process is part of the process that created Loki, you see, right? And thus also the nurturing principle as such, right? He brings force upon her. And she reciprocates that force karmically through the offspring of his that she gives him. And this force is a force that can undo the world. Well, in reality, it's going to exploit the undoing of the world. Right? When I talk about the corrupted Loki situation, which gets into aspects of my Blue Flame Healing Arts and Occult Science discipline, this is different than the raw, natural interpretation of the Eddas, of even a malevolent trickster, right? Because Odin is the benevolent trickster, and thus Loki, the blood brother, the shadow of Odin. That would have been the malevolent side of it, right? But even the malevolent trickster bestows gifts. It's just that he's got the capability of malevolence and uses it as such because Loki is a Jotun. Loki is a primordial force of nature. The corrupted Loki is involved with the inversions. The inversions that crush the human spirit as such and things like that, and is part of a different side of the narrative. And it's just part of the wisdom of not trusting Loki. The only way that that you can properly respect Loki is by not trusting him. Period. Loki wants you to not trust him because you cannot tell the difference between the actual Loki and this dark inversion that is not. It's part of the aspects of the system with the imposter sky gods. These various dark archons. There are light archons too, right? There's good archons and bad archons. Thoth is kind of like the spirit of the embodiment of the office of Tahuti. And there's different entities that have taken the name of Thoth. And there was a period in time where Thoth betrayed humanity. And I believe that the seat of Tahuti has been restored since then. But that doesn't mean the specter of this dark archon isn't there, because that entity still exists. It's just been thrown from office. Understand that, right? But it has, but it knows how to work in an imposter, imitation, a renegade aspect of the office. Kind of like when the CIA goes renegade when it doesn't like what the United States is doing. And then the CIA goes renegade and causes all sorts of suffering. Anyway, let's jump back in. And let me check in with chat over here. How are you guys doing? Let's see. 100%. Wait, good ing. Hold on a second. Heidi gets injured. Where am I here? Trying to discern that. 100% right. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm just a little bit lost. Okay. So kind of like Freud's. Yeah. Okay. I read that. Okay. I'm with you, but it's probably made him more neurotic. No doubt. Well, listen. What do you think some big head psychologist is gonna, like, show some big headed psychologist all my shit? Like, what? Just let him see all that spews forth from my weave. All this stuff. Some of it like what the hell, child? Like sometimes something childish and immature comes out of my mouth, something chauvinistic, which I'm trying to do like as a joke in the uncanny valley, almost sarcasm, and I really shouldn't do sarcasm, but like all this shit, right? Like, really wonder what they'd really say, right? And maybe they could give me a two-sided analysis. Say like, okay, here's the good things I will say, here's the bad things I will say. This is how I'm going to talk shit about you, and this is how I'm going to talk gold about you. All right, like what's a neurotic? I would have to, like, a neurotic is like, can he tie his shoelaces and string a sentence together? Right, like, like he had a big vocabulary. It's like, all right, he was a little bit neurotic. People do crazy things to chase their whatever, we have to have whatever is wrong with dudes like Freud. We got to get like that's kind of like that's like surface level like arguments about a man's character, right? We need to actually get into the meat of his intentions, right? Whatever's personal is whatever kind of judgment. Some of it is like, I get it, right? Because we're all looking at these elites and their estranged social habits, right? That's a big thing in the truther community, is the estranged social habits of the elites, right? Because the elites, who are all like appealing to these Christian sentiments, they're practicing, their ancient Dionysian rites, and you can't fucking tell the difference because Christianity just went and put a robe on Dionysus, especially to hide his genitals, so you didn't know that he was also a she. Right? And they got the party under the table. Because they don't want you to know that they made all that shit up about sin, right? They also don't want you to know that there's a lot of shit that you're doing to your body that's really, really, really unhealthy, and the only reason why they're fighting for you to have all of these things instead of real fucking soul connection, life, and happiness, and all that satisfied shit is because they'd really like you to volunteer for scientific experiments. Because that'll help a future plan. And often, a lot of these peoples are also down with it. It's just like, yeah, I hate my genitals, and I want you to have a scientific achievement. Sign me up. And they're like that. And that is Dionysian, because Dionysus is about, like, the freedom of the human spirit. And I wonder if also being Dionysian is lying to yourself, because, I'm pretty sure that you're just butchering your genitals, and why bother? Did you just consider just relaxing and enjoying yourself? If you want to do all the womanly things, enjoy yourself, sincerely pretending, because your spirit needs to work that out or whatever. Like why are you doing experimental body alterations and having to deal with infections all the time and being on medications and everything? And we're trying to have compassion for what you want to do, but I think we're also kind of enabling you. And people tell me that if I tell you that, I'm a hateful person. And then that leads to becoming crucified. So, as a pagan, I'm not interested in being crucified. So you have a right to make your own mistakes. I just sincerely hope that you're happy, and my heart's always gonna say something that way, but not unsolicited. But don't expect me to compromise my integrity. I will use very few words. I will use very few words, and I will lead with my soul level support for you. That's where I vibe at. You know, the rest is I think your nervous system might be shot, and so you get twitchy with anybody that sounds like the enemy, and you're gaslit to all hell. Anyway, that the sign should be together only when it's not yet has been filled. Filled up is so far from the case that it is precisely then that Dasein is no longer. Right, my state of debt in my world as a part of my Dasein was resolved last week, and it changes the sense of pressure I feel from the world, because I have given the world back what it gave to me. I have reached Gebo. And with that Gebo, the pressure is released, and it feels good. And wouldn't you know, the Rune Wunyo right after that. And that's how the runes work, folks. Anyway, Gebo has been fulfilled. I have Wunyo, and yeah, look, things are looking good for my income this year. It's interesting. A bunch of synchronicities, plus it's the beginning of the year. Next week I'm having my review. If the boss liked my performance last year, I'm gonna have gonna have a raise at the very least. And this will be my third raise within 2 years. Not bad. Any Dasein always exists in such a manner that it's not yet belongs to it. But are there not entities which are as they are, and to which a not yet can belong, but which do not necessarily have Dasein's kind of being? Interesting. Okay, so let me read that question again. But are there not entities which are as they are, and to which a not yet can belong, but which do not necessarily have Dasein's kind of being? Okay, so it's asking if there are entities that don't have Dasein's kind of being that also have this experience of having not yet. If I understand the question, this kind of thing of like it's not there yet. So, for instance, we can say the last quarter is still outstanding until the moon gets full. Oh, that's very funny that he's equating moon cycles with debt payments. Heidegger knew what was up. It's funny, Heidegger, you're the best, right? So the last quarter is still outstanding until the moon gets full. And, you know, it goes from quarter moon to half moon to full moon, right? And then it goes last quarter after the next half moon. But anyway, the not yet diminishes as the concealing shadow disappears. But here the moon is always present at hand as a whole already, leaving aside the fact that we can never get the moon wholly in our grasp, even when it is full. This not yet does not in any way signify a not yet being together of the parts which belong to the moon, but pertains only to the way we get it in our grasp perceptually. Now you see, moon, like the rune man'az is the rune of the mind. It is the rune of the moon. If you didn't know, it was also the rune of the moon. And we call the currency money, because it's moony, mindy, man. It's the mankind rune as well, because it's man and his mind, right? And this is all in divine accord with the Kybelians' alchemical thinking. Hermetic thinking, if you will. The not yet which belongs to design, however, is not just something which is provisionally, and hold on, did I skip ahead? I feel like I skipped ahead. Not yet, signifying not yet being together, parts of the moon. The not yet which belongs to Dasein, however, is not just something which is provisionally and occasionally inaccessible to one's own experience or even to that of a stranger. It is not yet actual at all. Our problem does not pertain to getting into our grasp the not yet, which is the character of Dasein. It pertains to the possible being or not being of this not yet. Dasein must as itself become, that is to say, be what it is not yet. Thus, if we are to be able, by comparison, to define that being of the not yet, which is of the character of Dasein, we must take into consideration entities of whose kind of being becoming belongs. When, for instance, a fruit is unripe, it goes towards its ripeness. In this process of ripening, that which the fruit is not yet is by no means pieced on as something not yet present at hand. The fruit brings itself to ripeness, and such a bringing of itself is a characteristic of its being as a fruit. Nothing imaginable which one might contribute to it would eliminate the unripeness of the fruit. If this entity did not come to ripeness of its own accord, when we speak of the not yet, of the unripeness, we do not have in view something else which stands outside, ausens tehens, and which, with utter indifference to the fruit, might be present at hand in it and with it. What we have in view is the fruit itself in its specific kind of being. The sum which is not yet complete is, as something ready to hand, a matter of indifference. As regards the remainder, which is lacking and unready to hand, though taken strictly, it can neither be indifferent to that remainder, nor not be indifferent to it. What we got here? All right, I don't have to read that. I will be reading 2 and... Okay, so I'll read 2 and 3. I don't have to read 1. The ripening fruit, however, not only is not indifferent to its unripeness as something other than itself, but it is that unripeness as it ripens. The not yet has already been included in the very being of the fruit, not as some random characteristic, but as something constitutive correspondingly as long as any Dasein is already its not yet. Whew, it is such a pain, understanding all of this. It's not that hard to understand, but it's very interesting because I'm making this choice to read it to you, right? And hearing it back and reading it at pace and not trying to read it too slow, right? Because these kinds of sentences are so tight in their rational logic that it can be almost impossible to understand what he's saying, because you have to torque all your psychic relationship to it. So let me reread this whole passage again. The ripening fruit, however, not only is not indifferent to its unripeness as something other than itself, but it is that unripeness as it ripens. The not yet has already been included in the very being of the fruit, not as some random characteristic, but as something constitutive, correspondingly, as long as any Dasein is already its not yet. Okay, great. Now I got it. It's the animist principle of that fruit. He's supposing that the fruit has a subjective consciousness in which it knows that it's this state, and it's this state of not being ripe yet, right? It's in a ripening process. This is the Ingvaz rune, the Ingvaj, the transformational rune, right? So ripening, Inguar Frey, the alchemical fire, the transmutational fire. It's still transmuting itself. It hasn't reached its final form, like me. I am in a strength conditioning phase. I'm conditioning. I'm not in a strength condition. I have not reached condition. I am in conditioning, right? There is a day that I get stronger. There is a day that I get leaner. There is a day that I get thicker. There is a day that that I hit harder. It's all of these things happening to my body and to my performance. And I am conditioning myself to perform. Because if there's a fucking war, I want to be able to fight for myself. And then, if I can fight for myself well enough, I might be able to fight for you if I like you. The ripening fruit, however, okay, all right, I read that and already understand it. So anyway, so that's an example of an inanimate object that, whether it has a mind or not, is of certainty having an experience. Okay. The end is the beginning, and the beginning is the end. Right, the Ouroboros, right? You should be listening. You should be listening to Interverse Podcast's Marvelous Demystifiers series, Chance and Slick Dissident, doing deep weave breakdowns, de-occulting of the Loki series. And they're getting real deep in the weeds in the occult aspects of quantum mechanics. Oh, it's good gravy. And me and Gabe had our Loki episode. I've had supplemental statements on Loki that I've often thrown out there in usually drive streams. And they'll say, I'll usually throw a point about Loki into those into the title of that video. If you look at some of the drive streams, those are the ones with just my my avatar there, the phoenix wings and the Z and on the black on the blue field behind it. Anyway, with those, we talk about Ouroboros, and we talk about things that Ouroboros represents in an occult fashion, and how Ouroboros demonstrates his nature, as an actor playing an energy. He's an actor who's named after an energy force, right? Like what they're, this is like the TVA is a place of these. They're basically time Jotuns, right? They're all, and there's a reason why in Norse mythology, most of the Jotuns, at least the major Jotuns, like the primordial gods, if you will, all of them are fortune tellers, even the men, right? You have to understand, in amongst the Norse gods, pretty much all the fortune telling is the women and then Odin. Right? Otherwise, fortune telling is there's no other male deity to my knowledge. Maybe Njord can do it, but I don't have Njord is one of the gods I know the least about, because I'm very estranged from nautical life, unlike some of my ancestors. Closest I feel to Njord is I go to the beach and I take a jog and I breathe in the sea air and I see seagulls and I see ships off the shore and whatever, and but I don't have sea legs. I mean, I probably could have sea legs. I'd have to train them. I'm wondering how nauseous I'd be walking around on a boat. I think it would be fun to, do a thing like working on a guy's boat. Get a chance to travel and get paid to do it. But then I wouldn't be able to live stream. I'm pretty sure I would want to travel, because that's the real world. And I'll have internet access in some way, obviously. But anyway. Let's see. How much have we read here? Am I close to the end of this thing yet? All right, 1, 2. All right, we have it's about 3 pages. All right, 3 more pages. And then we're, what time is it now? Now it's 7:30. Man, this has been a pretty filling run, hasn't it? How long has it been since the last break? I took the last break at the top of the hour, right? Kind of close. Oh, it's been a lot of time, hasn't it? All right, we're going to take another break here then. This is going to be the next break. All right. Oh, I effing love this song. This is Gwydion.
Der kalte Winter hielt uns fest, doch nun dreht sich das Rad. In alten Träumen sah ich dich, wenn ich unterm Monde lag. So bin ich aus tiefstem Traum durch dein Wort erwacht. Und mit dir ziehen Wald und Baum in die letzte Schlacht. In der Kälte warm, weht von ferne dein Gesang.
Oh God, that song gets so effing heavy. Hold on a second here. should be turned this way slightly, right? No. That way slightly? That, oh, my bad, that way. There we go. Now I'm actually centered. That's better. Anyway, woo! Yep, that particular song's got, Elveti, which is, that's Gaelic. They're from, Switzerland. They're folk metal, and they got some straight folk albums and some straight folk songs on heavy albums. They mostly got heavy albums. They're fucking awesome. I think I've seen them like, God, I must have seen them like 6 to 8 times or something, because they'd be at like every pagan show throughout the 2000s. So I would just end up just catching them all the time. Anyway, yeah. So I was just sharing in chat because Anthony asked me about a bit of my workout routine, and so that's off topic, but I threw it at him in the chat. Some of the stuff I do, I don't even want to talk about it that much because I can't quite brag because I'm doing this myself, and I'm not trying to incur a condition. And, if I don't got a spotter, I'm not going to push myself. So I don't know what I can really deadlift, right? Because I'm typically, it's on the casual side. I'm not even putting on a belt. I wouldn't lift anything that I would even need a belt for. So I need a belt. I'm going to start thinking about I need a spotter. And I usually am just by myself at the gym, and I'm looking around. I'm just like, I don't want to ask any of these people to spot me. I just don't. Right? I might find like one guy kind of like maybe he's got good vibes or something. And I'll be like, hey, you seem like an all right dude. You want to spot me? Right? Something like that. But like, I'm pretty sure everybody at the gym just kind of like wants to be left alone, right? I got my bar over here, and I could possibly get that thing up to maybe 40 or something pounds on each side, so that'd be like 80 pounds plus the bar, which the bar is probably like 10 pounds. I don't know, like 90 pounds there, right? So I would have to buy more plates, and I actually need to get better locks for the bar. I've been building this stuff with hand-me-down equipment, right? And hand-me-down it's just the best way on the budget. Anyway, let's not smudge my awesome makeup. Did I screw this up? Can't tell. Whatever. All right. So, let's jump back in. That which makes up the lack of totality in Dasein, the constant ahead of itself, is neither something still outstanding in assimilative togetherness, nor something which has not yet become accessible. It is a not yet, which any Dasein, as the entity which it is, has to be. Nevertheless, the comparison with the unripeness of the fruit shows essential differences, although there is a certain agreement. If we take note of these differences, we shall recognize how indefinite our talk about the end and ending has hitherto been. Ripening is the specific being of the fruit. It is also a kind of being of the not yet, of unripeness, and as such a kind of being is formally analogous of Dasein, in that the latter, like the former, is in every case already its not yet, in a sense still to be defined, right? It's kind of like an abandoned building. An abandoned building is going to be in a state of disrepair. That is a Dasein for the building because it's abandoned. Eventually, shit's going to fall apart. A door's hinges are going to rust off. A glass is going to break, and no one is going to fix it after there's a high wind and something crashes through the window, right? The roof is going to collapse in because branches fell on it and the accrued weight and broke through the roofing, and now there's water and it's going through an erosion process. This is the state of being of this building, right? This is the same thing as the as the fruit attaining ripeness, because ripeness is just before rottenness, right? You want to take advantage before it is past its date of maximum nutrition and flavor. Okay. Okay, ending has hitherto. Okay, I think I read all that, right? Yes, I did. Okay. This case, not yet in a sense. But even then, this does not signify that ripeness as an end and death as an end coincide with regard to their ontological structure as ends. With ripeness, the fruit fulfills itself. Okay, I think I said I'd read this, right? Yes. Mit der Reif vollendet sich die Frucht. Notice that the verb vollenden, which we here translate as fulfill, involves the verb enden, to end, while vollenden may mean to bring fully to an end or to terminate. It may also mean to complete or to perfect. Okay. And by the way, with the German, the band Fawn is German, and I believe most of their songs are sung in German. But is the death at which Dasein arrives a fulfillment in this sense? With its death, Dasein has indeed fulfilled its course, but in doing so, has it necessarily exhausted its specific possibilities? Rather, are not these precisely what gets taken away from Dasein? Even unfulfilled, Dasein ends. On the other hand, so little is it the case that Dasein comes to its ripeness only with death, that Dasein may well have passed its ripeness before the end. Oh, whoops. While we have translated Reif by its cognate ripeness, this word applies generally to almost any kind of maturity, even that of Dasein, not merely the maturity of fruits and vegetables. Okay, all right, so the word is, even before Heidegger, had a context in German of being likened to the human condition and other kinds of references as an analogy that becomes its own particular appropriate and proper term for a thing. Kind of like how we say we erect a building, and I have an erection when I want to conceive a child. For the most part, Dasein ends in unfulfillment, or else by having disintegrated and been used up. Ending does not necessarily mean fulfilling oneself. It thus becomes more urgent to ask in what sense, if any, death must be conceived as the ending of Dasein. In the first instance, ending signifies stopping, and it signifies this in senses which are ontologically different. The rain stops. Is it no longer present at hand? The road stops. Such an ending does not make the road disappear, but such a stopping is determinative for the road as this one which is present at hand. Hence, ending as stopping can signify either passing over into non-presence at hand, or else being present at hand only when the end comes. For rain, being present at hand only when the end comes. If I'm standing in the rain and being in the existence of rain, and rain is existing, is itself experiencing its existence as it rains on me, and then it comes to an end, and I'm in the middle of it, I get to experience the end of the existence of this particular rain. Okay. Unfinished way, road breaks, last, okay. Unfinished, hold on, where was I? Hence ending in road. The road stops. Wait, where's the rain? Where's the rain example? I'm now off. As painted as finished last stroke of the brush. Why am I crazy? Rain stops. It is no longer present. The road stops. Such an ending does not make the road disappear. Right. Hence, ending as stopping can signify either passing over. Right. Here we go. The latter kind of ending, in turn, may either be determinative for something which is present at hand in an unfinished way, as a road breaks off when one finds it under construction, or it may rather constitute the finishedness of something present at hand, as the painting is finished with the last stroke of the brush. See, this is very interesting because this book itself, for at least many people in the world, is like the road, where the road is unfinished. We do not have Division 3 and if there's any further divisions from being in time. They're not available. They haven't been translated. And I forget if that's because the originals are stowed away or whatnot, right? I keep forgetting to look up that point as I'm doing this, because this is a read in Musings. It's not like a prepared lecture, right? This is me, this is you following me in my educational study process and learning with me, and me being a demonstration of a way of thinking, of a way of extracting gnosis from the literature. But ending as getting finished does not include fulfilling. On the other hand, whatever has got to be fulfilled must indeed reach the finishedness that is possible for it. Fulfilling is a mode of finishedness and is founded upon it. Finishedness is itself possible only as a determinate form of something present at hand or ready to hand. Even ending in the sense of disappearing can still have its modifications according to the kind of being which an entity may have. The rain is at an end. That is to say, it has disappeared. The bread is at an end. That is to say, it has been used up and is no longer available as something ready to hand. By none of these modes of ending can death be suitably characterized as the end of Dasein. If dying as being at an end were understood in the sense of an ending of the kind we have discussed, then Dasein would thereby be treated as something present at hand or ready to hand. In death, Dasein has not been fulfilled, nor has it simply disappeared. It has not become finished, nor is it wholly at one's disposal as something ready to hand. On the contrary, just as Dasein is already its not yet, and is its not yet constantly, as long as it is already its end too. The ending which we have in view when we speak of death does not signify Dasein's being at an end, zu Ende sein, but a being towards the end, sein zum End, of this entity. Death is a way to be, which Dasein takes over as soon as it is. As soon as man comes to life, he is at once old enough to die. Once man comes to life, not when he's born, when he comes to life. And as we all know, there's an argument about when life starts between conception and birth. Ending as being towards the end must be clarified ontologically in terms of Dasein's kind of being, and presumably the possibility of an existent being of that not yet which lies before the end. Die Möglichkeit eines existierenden Seins des noch nicht das vor dem Ende liegt. The earlier editions have das ja vor dem Ende. Which lies before the end, will become intelligible only if the character of ending has been determined existentially. The existential clarification of being towards the end will also give us for the first time an adequate basis for defining what can possibly be the meaning of our talk about a totality of Dasein. If needed, the totality is to be constituted by death as the end. Our attempts to understand Dasein's totality by taking as our point of departure a clarification of the not yet and going on to a characterization of ending has not led us to our goal. It has shown only in a negative way that the not yet which Dasein in every case is resists interpretation as something still outstanding. This end towards Dasein is as existing remains inappropriately defined by the notion of a being at an end. These considerations, however, should at the same time make it plain that they must be turned back in their course. A positive characterization of the phenomena in question, being not yet ending totality, succeeds only when it is unequivocally oriented to Dasein's state of being. But if we have any insight into the realms where those end structures and totality structures which are to be construed ontologically with Dasein belong, this will, in a negative way, make this unequivocal character secure against wrong turnings. If we are to carry out a positive interpretation of death and its character as an end, by way of existential analysis, we must take as our clue the basic state of Dasein at which we have already arrived, the phenomenon of care. Right, so we are then revisiting care in its relationship to the end of Dasein. Okay, so real quick, let me see here. So this is page 291 or something. Let's see how long 49 is. Do I want to go into this? Oh, 49 is not long at all. Okay. We're going to take another break. Then we're going to do chapter 49, which I think is 3 pages? About 3 pages. So that should be one segment more. And thus I don't have to say I only read one chapter this episode. All right, here we go. Which song do we got here? The Voined song. Where are my fins at?
Als weinen spielte, wurde Spiel zu Spiele, Freude sich zu Freude stimmte, Tiere
Like I love like most of the songs on this album. That particular, like, even that particular song, like that's that comes right after Gwydion, right? And it's like the exact opposite energy that you leave Gwydion on. It's so just like almost like a lullaby, right? It's a very chill song. It's very low on the drums, but it's still got a really like nice. It's just it's got a good rhythm to it, you know. It's got a good cadence to the way it's sung. It's pleasant on the ears the way it dances around them. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, let's see. Yeah, chapter 49, my friends. How the existential analysis of death is distinguished from other possible interpretations of this phenomenon. Interesting. How we feeling? How's all the morbidity going for everybody? It's been a little quiet in the chat room, but that's okay. Anyway, the unequivocal character of our ontological interpretation of death must first be strengthened by our bringing explicitly to mind what such an interpretation cannot inquire about, and what it would be vain to expect it to give us. And it would be vain to expect it to give us any information or instruction about. Honach dies nicht fragen und worüber ein Auskunft und Anweisung von ihr wirklich erwartet werden kann. The old editions have kann after fragen, and muss, where the newer editions have kann. Ah, cool. Thank you, Anthony. AMV. Death in the widest sense is a phenomenon of life. Life must be understood as a kind of being to which there belongs a being in the world. Only if the kind of being is oriented in a privative way to Dasein can we fix its character ontologically. Even Dasein may be considered purely as life. When the question is formulated from the viewpoint of biology and physiology, Dasein moves into that domain of being which we know as the world of animals and plants. Interesting. So animals and plants. In this field, we can obtain data and statistics about the longevity of plants, animals, and men. And we do this by ascertaining them ontically. Connections between longevity, propagation, and growth may be recognized. The kinds of death, the causes, contrivances, and ways in which it makes its entry can be explored. Okay, so that gets very interesting. Like, now you're talking about literally like a horror movie director. Horror movie directors, you are not a horror movie director unless this is what's on your mind when you are writing a film. All the ways in which death is introduced. Because even if nobody dies because you're kind of a kiddie horror film, it's the threat and the way it comes into the mind. Right? That's why, like, if you watched as a kid, Are You Afraid of the Dark? Or Goosebumps, things like that, right? The death didn't quite get there, for a lot of those stories, right? But it was just about going through the terrifying experience, the creepy doll, the cursed monkey paw, like all the classic tropes, right? And you go through all these troubles and you're largely running away from death and you're trying to undo this threat of death or this threat of suffering or this threat of being forever tormented by a spirit. In other words, to be consistently made afraid in a very particular way and stressful way and cruel way for the rest of your life because you're cursed. Like these themes, right? That's all in there, and all of it revolves around stress put on your Dasein. So, Underlying this biological ontical exploration of death is a problematic that is ontological. We still have to ask how the ontological essence of death is defined in terms of that of life. In a certain way, this has always been decided already in the ontical investigation of death. Such investigations operate with preliminary conceptions of life and death, which have been more or less clarified. These preliminary conceptions need to be stretched out by the ontology of Dasein. Within the ontology of Dasein, which is superordinate to an ontology of life, the existential analysis of death is, in turn, subordinate to a characterization of Dasein's basic state. The ending of that which lives we have called perishing. Dasein, too, has its death, of the kind of appropriate to anything that lives, and it has it, not in ontical isolation, but as co-determined by its primordial kind of being. Insofar as this is the case, Dasein too can end without authentically dying, though on the other hand, qua Dasein, it does not simply perish. We designate this intermediate phenomenon as its demise. Let's see what we got here. We're going to have two coming up real fast, too. Eblben. This term, which literally means something like living out one's life, is used in ordinary German as a rather legalistic term for a person's death. We shall translate it as demise, both as a noun and as a verb, which also has legalistic connotations, but this translation is an arbitrary one and does not adequately express the meaning which Heidegger is explaining. And then annotation 2 isn't got anything to say. Let the term dying stand for the way of being in which Dasein is towards its death. Accordingly, we must say that Dasein never perishes. Dasein, however, can demise only as long as it is dying. Medical and biological investigation into demising can obtain results which may become significant ontologically if the basic orientation for an existential interpretation of death has been made secure. Or must sickness and death in general, even from a medical point of view, be primarily conceived as existential phenomena? The existential interpretation of death takes precedence over any biology and ontology of life, but it is also the foundation for any investigation of death, which is biographical or historiological, ethnological or psychological. In any typology of dying as a characterization of the conditions under which a demise is experienced and of the ways in which it is experienced, the concept of death is already presupposed. Moreover, psychology of dying gives information about the living of the person who is dying, rather than about dying itself. This simply reflects the fact that when Dasein dies, and even when it dies authentically, it does not have to do so with an experience of its factical demising, or in such an experience, likewise the way in which death is taken among primitive peoples and their ways of comporting themselves towards it in magic and cult illuminate primarily the understanding of Dasein, but the interpretation of this understanding already requires an existential analytic and a corresponding conception of death. So, in other words, this not yet being dead of Dasein doesn't really have an experience of that. It can only have the demising experience, the things that are leading up to it, right? Like if I'm in a war and I'm bleeding out, I'm in a demising experience of my Dasein, and my Dasein is going to die. Just like any injury where you're bleeding out, basically, and blacking out while bleeding out, and all, having all these problems, right? If I am drowning, I am probably going to like when I before I die in the drowning process, you're not dead just because your heart stops beating, right? You're dead when the life force has stopped, right? So there's a period of time where your heart is stopped, but you could still be alive, even though there's no blood pumping. And you haven't experienced brain death yet, but that brain death is coming, right? X, Y, and Z. So you're probably in this unconscious state. You're probably in a dream because your brain is still active despite being officially suffocated, and you are in a demising experience where you weren't moments before. Or if you're extraordinarily old, if you're having organ failure, like I mentioned, my whole telomere situation, right? All of our telomere situations. An elderly person having organ failures is in a demising experience. So all this makes sense to me. On the other hand, in the ontological analysis of being towards the end, there is no anticipation of our taking any existential stand towards death. If death is defined at the end of Dasein, that is to say, of being in the world, this does not imply any ontical decision whether after death still another being is possible, either higher or lower, or whether Dasein lives on or even outlasts itself and is immortal. So this is a very important distinction towards this significance of Dasein in the grander scheme of you, because we're all here presupposing that we are eternal souls, or that we possibly had a start, but we don't necessarily have a finish. But maybe we have a finish. But that finish is still sort of a transformation. And we may be just saying that because we're terrified of not existing, right? The most terrifying thing about death is not existing. And it's hard to say if that's worse than your imagination of Christian hell. And that's whether Christian hell is qualified by the sins that they say are how you end up in Christian hell. And that entire premise is based on a lie, because it's so fucking subjective that it is impossible to say. And people can misinterpret your feelings because of a poor choice of words due to a poor vocabulary, which everybody is going to have early on in things. All right, man. You'll always catch the rest of it on the replay. Thank you so much for being here. On the other hand, in the ontological analysis of being towards the end, there is no anticipation of our taking any existential stand towards death. If death is defined as the end of Dasein, that is to say, of being in... I'm sorry, I read all that already. The immortal... here we are. Nor is anything decided ontically about the otherworldly and its possibility, any more than about the this worldly. Basically, he's saying that he's not commenting on the afterlife. So what's happening here is that there's the difference between you as a soul and Dasein. And what he's basically saying is that we don't know what happens to the soul, but the Dasein of the soul with certainty comes to an end because of we who are left behind in the event of the you that we've always known as not being here anymore, right? your continuity in this instance is now come to its conclusion. And if you are a reincarnationist, like I am, next life, you're going to have some sort of incarnation here again. And there's an interesting memory loss process that usually we go through. And whether you go through that or not, all the karma is wiped clean from the soul for that life. There's a different context for karma that is involved with your dharma, your life path when in this incarnation, which basically operates in the polar opposite of fulfilled karma in the previous life. And that's what shapes your next level in the game, and your path work towards graduation, right? Because we're starting to see, meaning people that have been doing the work and succeeding, as we're seeing many of these very interesting, gifted children, and they're not even fucking autistic, but they have nearly full, lucid, particular memories with lots of details of a life that they seem to maybe have just lived a generation ago. And it's been considered evidence of reincarnation. It's considered legitimate, serious evidence. Thank you. Thank you, AMV. Correct. All right, let's get to this annotation. Do I have to read it? Yes. Über das Jenseits Unsein Möglichkeit wird ebenso wenig und sich entscheiden wie über das Diesseits. The quotation marks Diesseits appears only in the later editions. It is not as if norms and rules for comporting oneself towards death were to be presupposed for edification, but our analysis of death remains purely this worldly, insofar as it interprets that phenomenon merely in the way in which it enters into any particular Dasein as a possibility of its being. Only when death is conceived in its full ontological essence can we have any methodological assurance in even asking what may be after death. Only then can we do so with meaning and justification. Whether such a question is a possible theoretical question at all will not be decided here. This worldly ontological interpretation of death takes precedence over any ontical otherworldly speculation. Hey, D.E. Saccone is back. I've come around on archaics. He is very erudite. I just balk at the term simulation. Mere words, I suppose. Yeah, I know how you feel about that, right? I have talked about this because I don't like invoking the technological terminology because I do not want to invoke the humanist Dasein. I don't want to see a synthetic world, right? I'm all for having a Type 1 civilization and having that kinds of advancements for us and for me. But I want this to be in guidance, in natural and divine accord, right? And so does archaics. That is his values. I'd say his values are right there with me. He rocks the Mjolnir and he looks like it belongs around his neck. So I'm going to take Thor's cue on that and say I respect him on a heathen level. Excuse me. So yeah, So just like you don't have to use that terminology for yourself personally, but I would say just make sure you know some of the terminology because it's just the way you talk within the errant conversations, right? And it shows that you comprehend and respect the source material because every author, especially doing the kind of work that the books of Archaics does. I've never read them. Not yet. It's not yet. My DOS sign is not yet on reading those books, right? Just like I've got James True's Ark of the Baphomet sitting on my table. I haven't read that one yet either. I need to read. I got to finish reading The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. Overloaded, and I'm not going to read Ayn Rand on the air. There's books that I want to read privately, and there's books I want to read online. And those books I'd rather read privately. I don't think it would be proper. It might even be illegal for me to do something like read Ark of the Baphomet. Either way, I think it'd be rude because it's just like, I respect James. It's literally his latest book, and I want him to be successful. Therefore, you're going to have to go read it yourself. Anyway. Let's see. Where was I? Okay, it's not norms of edification, but our analysis of death remains purely this-worldly insofar as it interprets that phenomenon merely in the way in which it enters into any particular Dasein as a possibility of its being. Only when death is conceived in its full ontological essence can we have any methodological assurance in even asking what may be after death. Only then can we do so with meaning and justification. Whether such a question is a possible theoretical question at all will not be decided here. The this-worldly ontological interpretation of death takes precedence over any ontical otherworldly speculation. So what he's saying is he's set the guidelines, the boundaries. I guess this is the boundaries for the whole book, that he is not getting into our experience of the afterlife, right? He's not going to even try to speculate on that. Simulation can make people think they have no responsibility. There lies the problem. Yes, but you can, listen, no matter how you slice it, because you're extracting the same meaning, you can misconstrue it that way. The ancients called this the Maya. The Maya, and the Maya is an illusion, a dream. If this is a dream, then I don't have to go to work. If this is a dream, I can just will there to be food in the refrigerator. Right? I can just will the life that I want. I can have a dream simulated projection of a girlfriend, and I don't have to go out and talk to girls. No. I don't think something he won't say. Well, like saying somebody won't say something in the way that you are implying sounds like it makes it sound nefarious. Listen. There are things that I won't say. There are things that I won't. Everybody has things that they won't say. That doesn't mean anything. I won't tell you my home address. Right? You look at the breadth of the conversation. You look at the people that Jason has talked to. And you look at the quality of the people around him. You know a tree by the fruit that it bears. I would relax. I would relax about all of that. Obviously be wise, but relax. You can be wise and not run around with your eyes like this. Ooh, right? I mean, just read the Havamal. And, you'll know when to go around and turn your eye around and about and look in every corner, okay? First line of the Havamal is look all over the place for guys that want to kill you. Don't walk into any room and not just get the layout of your surroundings first. In short, meet your Dasein up front. Meet your world. Meet your existence of reality. Don't be a fool. That is literally when I say there are no victims, only fools, that ultimately comes out of Havamal 1. Havamal 1. Because at the very least, the first section of Havamal, from 1 on till they kind of change subject, is literally coming straight out of the essence of the Kavasir. Because the Kavasir was meant to be the wisdom of all the gods bestowed upon the spirit of mankind. And then the Dark Elves exploited that, robbed him of his essence, and hoarded it for themselves. Oh, Heidegger won't address the afterlife. Okay. You've got to make sure that you put that together, because, listen, man, there's a chat going on here. If I didn't respond to anything at all, people may have assumed that you were talking about archaics or responding to something, because I was talking about archaics before you mentioned that. So I was piping up a conversation with you, right? So just make sure that you let me know which subject your comment is strung to. But I'm glad that I interpreted it that way, because I really wanted to say that. I really wanted to say that because I have very particular reasons why I disagree with certain people that don't like Jason Breshears, right? Because just like the people that don't like James True, they make terrible arguments why they don't like them. Absolute garbage arguments. And because I liked these people, I said nothing. But I knew that they didn't have ammo for that. But I said maybe over time something will change. And maybe it will. But I'm going to have nothing to do with that process for the ones that I don't like anymore. They can fucking figure that out and figure out how to fucking, do with it what they will when they feel like it. Or they can just run around with their pride and just deny gnosis because they didn't like the messenger. This is the difference between me and other men in this fucking scene. And there are men of real integrity in this scene, and you will see them. They will show themselves when the tests arise. And I certainly hope to be worthy of those tests. By Tyr, I swear this. Where was I? Other than an awesome rant. Otherworldly speculation. Ah, yes, down here. Finally, what might be discussed under the logic of a metaphysic of death lies outside the domain of existential analysis of death. Questions of how and when death came into the world, what meaning it can have and is to have as an evil and affliction in the aggregate of entities. These are questions which necessarily presuppose an understanding not only of the character of being which belongs to death, but of the ontology of the aggregate of entities as a whole, and especially of the ontological clarification of evil and negativity in general. Thank you. Thank you, DES. D.E. Sakone. Your name is probably a lot easier to say than I think it is, but I'm tongue-tied with all the German. Methodologically, the existential analysis is superordinate to the questions of a biology, psychology, theodicy, or theology of death. Taken ontically, the result of the analysis show the peculiar formality and emptiness of any ontological characterization. However, that must not blind us to the rich and complicated structure of the phenomenon. If Dasein is if Dasein in general never becomes accessible as something present at hand, because being possible belongs in its own way to Dasein's kind of being, even less may we expect that we can simply read off the ontological structure of death, if death is indeed a distinctive possibility of Dasein. Right? Like right now, death is not a distinctive possibility. Maybe in 5 minutes, my world will change, and I may have to go through the demising process. Anyway, where was I? Okay, on the other hand, the analysis cannot keep clinging to an idea of death which has been devised accidentally and at random. We can restrain this arbitrariness only by giving beforehand an ontological characterization of the kind of being in which the end enters into Dasein's average everydayness. To do so, we must fully envisage those structures of everydayness which we have earlier set forth. The fact that in an existential analysis of death, existentielle possibilities of being towards death are consonant with it. It implies, by the essence of all ontological investigation, all the more explicitly must the existential definition of concepts be unaccompanied by any existential commitments. Hang on, we got one last annotation before the end. And we don't have to read it. Okay. Especially with relation to death, in which Dasein's character as possibility lets itself be revealed most precisely. The existential problematic aims only at setting forth the ontological structure of Dasein being towards the end. Woo! Okay, there we go. Excellent. Let me double check, because I'm assuming is 50 also short? If 50 is really short. No, 50 is not short. That's not short enough. I would have needed 50 to be like 2 pages for me to consider it. Because it's 8:30. I want to wind down and have some private time. My. Thank you guys so much for coming through and showing up. Thank you so much. This was a really great conversation from all of you. So, you know, my deepest gratitudes to Polymathing, D. Sakone. Anthony makes videos. You guys really made the conversation tonight. So, you know, don't worry about like people don't share me, and that's fine. I'm to be found, I suppose. I mean, share me. For fuck's sake, share me. But if you don't share me, I might act a little bitter about it, but that's just because I'm very proud. I'm a very proud man, but I'm not so proud that I, gotta put a shirt on because I must succeed at all costs, and therefore I must be judged and put a shirt on. No, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this like this because I love this, because I'm happy and I'm comfortable. And I feel good, and I love myself, and I know it. And you should, too. And if you don't, get yourself there. Because, I had to work. And I didn't make a dime. In fact, I spent a dime to get myself to this. And it's the best sacrifice I ever made. And, let's see if I can be more impressive in 2024, which that year hasn't quite started yet in the real calendar. And anybody who not just follows archaics, but all sorts of calendar people will tell you that the year hasn't started yet. All right. You guys, let's hit that end. Catch you guys later.